Hello, and welcome to the MLDS Mentors webinar for Project Extended Impact. My name is Tammy Mitchell, and I'm with the Community Training and Assistance Center, and I am joined today by my colleagues, Eric Johnson and Katie Garnis. Today, we're going to take you through some newer content that's being added to the MLDS content. And the new content is around three areas: student well-being, academic acceleration, and teacher recruitment, development, and retention. And so to kick us off, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Katie, and she's going to tell you about student well-being.
Thanks, Tammy. So the new content for student well-being is Learning Experience 5, Reading and Shaping School Culture, and it's Treatment 9, Leading for Student Well-being. The student well-being treatment really focuses on two core concepts. The first is well-being. We are defining student well-being as the ability to successfully handle life stresses and adapt to changes in difficult times. Supporting student well-being includes the principles, tools, and strategies that assist students and educators. The purpose is to develop self-awareness, self-management, decision-making, and interpersonal skills essential to student and educator success. The second concept is around trauma and trauma-informed practices. Trauma is the response to an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is physically or emotionally harmful and that has lasting adverse effects on an individual. Trauma can have a broad impact on students, including on their behaviors, relationships, and capacity to learn. We are emphasizing that building principals' capacity to be trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive assists them in expanding both their own and others' abilities to recognize students experiencing trauma and to develop and respond with classroom-level and school-wide interventions. It's important to note that we are looking at a whole child, whole school approach that supports all students rather than individual interventions. So the student well-being treatment is really comprised of 4 essential elements. The first is strong relationships. Second, knowing and managing self and others. Third, culture and climate. And fourth, trauma-informed practices. Looking at essential element 1, this is strong relationships. Strong relationships benefit both students and educators. Research shows having at least one trusted adult can protect against a variety of mental health factors, improve student engagement, and their academic outcomes. Further, teacher-student relationships might also improve teacher well-being. They mitigate certain classroom stressors, demonstrating their impact not just for students, but also for school adults. This is especially important now for schools to put in place the systems and structures that support student-teacher relationships. In essential element 1, for example, you will find the relationship mapping strategy. This strategy walks schools through identifying that each student has at least one trusted adult in the building. It surfaces students who may feel less connected. The goal is to ensure that every student has at least one adult at school that knows them well and checks in on them regularly. Essential element 2 is knowing and managing self and others. Models for student well-being attempt to identify the factors known to be related to success in the world. Included are skills such as self-management, self-awareness, relationships, and emotional regulation. In essential element 2, we emphasize in particular 3 domains of learning. These are cognitive, which involves the development of our mental skills and the acquisition of knowledge. Affective, which involves our feelings, emotions, and attitudes, and psychomotor, which involves utilizing our motor skills and coordinating them. MLDS participants will explore these domains and discuss how they apply to effective classroom management and instruction. Essential element 3 is culture and climate. Student well-being at school is intricately tied to school culture and climate. Principals are key to building a supportive school climate and developing responses to student well-being needs. Moreover, as the quote shows, principals who build a school climate in which students and teachers feel emotionally supportive provide a bedrock on which academic improvement efforts can rest. In essential element 3, participants will learn more about what to look for and how to implement a positive culture and climate in their school building. One exercise participants are walked through is the culture walk. In this activity, principals get to visit each other's schools and look for elements of culture and climate represented in this treatment. Finally, our fourth essential element is trauma-informed practices. Trauma is prevalent in our schools. More than 2/3 of children report at least one traumatic event by age 16. Children exposed to adverse child experiences, such as many experienced during the pandemic, often exhibit challenges with skills critical for success in school, such as executive functioning, social skills, and emotional regulation. Educators, therefore, must be equipped with the skills to recognize and respond appropriately to trauma to ensure student well-being and academic success. Essential element 4, therefore, guides participants through some of the fundamentals about trauma. For example, we explore the 4 R's: realize, having a basic realization about trauma and understanding how it can affect students and educators; recognize, so people in the school are able to recognize the signs of trauma; respond, educators are able to respond by applying the principles of a trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive approach; and resist, a trauma-informed approach seeks to resist re-traumatization of students. So included here are some suggestions for how you as mentors may follow up with principals regarding the learning that they will have undertaken in the student well-being treatment. For example, you might highlight ways you as a mentor build relationships in your work when discussing building strong relationships between principals and educators and students. You might also hold conversations with principals about the Compass Points activity and ask how they are going to work with others and how they see this as part of managing their staff. We also suggest following up with principals after they've conducted a culture walk and discussing elements that are showcased, what is included in the student well-being treatment. And finally, prompt principals to discuss what they have learned about trauma. Ask them to share what they've learned, what were some of their previous misconceptions, and how this might have changed their lens when they think about interacting with their own students or staff. With that, I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Tammy, to discuss the new content around academic acceleration.
Thanks so much, Katie. So when we're talking about academic acceleration, let's start right off with what it is not. It is not pushing students to learn more surface level content at a faster pace. As we talk about academic acceleration, it fits nicely within learning experience number 2, recognizing and developing excellent instruction, and it is new treatment 18, leading for academic acceleration. The MLDS definition of academic acceleration is built around these 4 tenets. These 4 tenets were originally published in the white paper, The Opportunity Myth, from TNTP in 2018. And these 4 tenets are grade appropriate assignments, strong instruction, deep engagement, and high expectations. When we talk about grade appropriate assignments, we want to compare and contrast acceleration with remediation. And this chart does just this. It is replicated from information in the white paper Accelerate, Don't Remediate, published by TNTP in 2021. So when you think about remediation, you think that remediation is spending significant time in below grade level content before moving on to new learning. But acceleration is connecting unfinished learning in the context of new learning. In remediation, working on many standards from prior grades for longer than a month of instruction. But acceleration is integrating past standards into current learning. Remediation is isolated from grade appropriate learning. But acceleration is just in time for grade appropriate learning in core or in extended learning time. In remediation, much time is spent on procedural fluency, whereas in acceleration, there's a balance. Fluency balanced with conceptual understanding and that real-world application of learning. So strong instruction is one of those 4 tenets. And of course, that's obvious. We want all students to have access to strong instruction. So when MLDS defines strong instruction, their core belief is that teachers should provide opportunities for students to grapple with challenging content within a classroom culture where it's okay to be wrong and to learn from mistakes. And instructional leaders, as they are observing for and coaching for strong instruction, better recognize strong instruction when they have a mental structure on which to organize their ever-growing knowledge base. We want to know, can principals get to the point where they can recognize grade level content and instruction in classroom walkthroughs? It may sound obvious, but sometimes our principals are leading schools where they didn't actually teach in those grade levels. A lot of high school and middle school teachers become principals, and sometimes principals of elementary schools. If a principal was once a middle school history teacher, does she recognize grade level content and instruction in a first grade classroom? Maybe, maybe not. And can principals coach teachers to implement instructional strategies that create equitable and supportive learning opportunities for all students? The tenet of deep engagement. Yes, of course, we want students to be engaged, but what does that mean? We think about these levels of enrollment where commitment is the highest level. Are learners committed to learning more? You can feel it when it happens, you can see it, and there's evidence that they are learning, but that is the highest level of deep engagement. The next level that's lower would be enrollment. Level 3, genuine compliance, then formal compliance, grudging compliance, non-compliance, and apathy. So many times we settle for genuine compliance or formal compliance. Sometimes we even settle for grudging compliance, but that is a long, long way from commitment and deep engagement in learning. So we want our educational leaders and principals to recognize, coach, and strive for commitment over compliance. And high expectations. Of course, we always say, oh yes, we have high expectations for all students. But what does that really mean? The core belief is that all students should be held to the same high standards regardless of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender, family situation, differing ability, or traumatic experiences. And in order to have high expectations, we have to be honest. We have to be willing to admit that catching up requires harder work from students. They're going to need to work harder in order to catch up. Principals and teachers together establish a culture that rewards hard work. It is important to set high expectations, which include honesty on the part of all adults about what students must do to improve and what teachers must do to get them there. And teachers who provide equitable instruction communicate and align high expectations for all students while providing appropriate instruction and scaffolding as needed. This quote here from the Murray, Darden, and Turner book, published in 2023, states that to praise substandard performance is to lower expectations. And that's hard to admit because we see teachers all the time telling kids, oh, good job, or, oh, that looks awesome. Not only is that not strong feedback, but a lot of times they're gushing praise over substandard work. And that's not fair to these students. Principals can use these I can statements as a self-assessment. They could go through these and rate them 1. I don't know anything about that. 2, I can do that with help and support. Or 3, I already know how to do that quite well. And hopefully within your mentoring relationship, you have a relationship where principals can be honest about these. I can identify, understand, and appreciate the ways and reasons teachers sometimes lower access to grade level work. I can explain using calming language the differences between remediation and acceleration. I can recognize the difference between grade level scaffolding and lowering expectations. That's a hard one. I can recognize grade level content and instruction in classroom walkthroughs. I can coach teachers to implement instructional strategies that create equitable and supportive learning opportunities for all students. I can ensure that students do not miss grade level instruction for intervention time. I can suggest and model examples of just-in-time moves for teachers to prevent unproductive struggle and continue learning. You have an important role as a mentor to these new principals. And so perhaps you could use these I can statements. And how do principals rate themselves? Have a good discussion about that and push them a little bit. How do they know? What evidence do they have to support their self-rating? If they say they already know how to do that, ask a little more. What might their blind spots be? Have the courage to help them discover their blind spots and be curious about getting better. And then how can you find and connect principals to the resources they need to grow and improve? Well, that's just an overview of academic acceleration. There's so much more content that you'll be exposed to, I think, down the road. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Eric, for teacher recruitment, development, and retention.
Mentors, teacher recruitment, development, retention, I think mentors will play a particularly important role in this process because this is an area that most administrators, we were never trained in. Most of us were never trained in how do we go about recruiting and developing marketing strategies and the components of, now we've always thought about keeping our most effective teachers, but the idea of the need of having to recruit people in our buildings when we have empty classrooms, for many administrators, this is a relatively new phenomenon. And across the field, this is something that was not as prevalent as it is over the last 5 years or so. So with this recruitment, retention, and development, we're going to house this within a particular treatment. This will be housed in the learning experience. You can move it forward, Tammy. We're going to house this within a learning experience 9, the human resource leadership, in a teacher recruitment, the treatment 6, teacher recruitment and retention. And so thinking about that, it might be important that we just take a moment and be clear about what we're talking about, because while we talk about the teacher shortage a great deal, I still think it's poorly understood because we talk about it like everybody's having a teacher shortage. And lots of people are, many districts are, but not everybody. And even the teacher shortages themselves are complex because they look different in different places, and also different kinds of teachers are leaving different rates. So for example, Black teachers are leaving the field at about twice the rate of folks who are not Black. So how we talk about the teaching shortage, but how we understand it is a little different than us just talking about it. And the shortage occurs for a variety of reasons, right? Some of it has to do with the obvious, right? That we have an insufficient number of certified people to put in classrooms to fill vacancies. Certainly that's straightforward. That's a big piece of it. But why do those vacancies happen? How are they showing up? Who are they impacting? Where are they happening? Those things are much less clear. And so we think about the unfilled vacancies happen for a number of reasons, right? Including reduced attractiveness of the profession. I mean, people are coming to the teaching profession less, and that's for a variety of reasons. Most people talk about it in the context of compensation, but that's not the only reason. That's not the reason teachers leave, and it's not the number one reason teachers leave, and it's not. It doesn't necessarily impact people's willingness to come to the field, right? So we talk about that, and also there's this increase in school enrollment, which is creating more classrooms in some places, which has contributed to the teacher shortage. But in other places, there are reduction in classrooms and excessive number of teachers leaving the field. So there's this range of reasons. It's uneven, it's not clear. We know that there's a teaching shortage broadly, but if we want to actually make inroads in a particular place at a particular time, we've got to understand that context. And lastly, the only reason we're talking about this, number one reason that this matters, is because of the impact that this shortage has on the effects that it has on student learning. And for that, let's look at some of the important considerations, right? Now, without question, school leaders matter. And they matter for a host of reasons, some of which I'll mention and many I won't. One of which, administrators play a significant role in the hiring process and bringing teachers to the classroom. So administrators play a significant role in providing an environment where effective teachers feel supported and they want to retain, they want to stay in that building. Administrators play a significant role in that. But research has identified nothing more important than the impact of an effective teacher in student academic achievement, which is why we're here, right? And how mentors can help us respond to that challenge. So retaining effective teachers stands out as a goal that has a direct impact on student performance. It's the one thing we know we can do that directly impacts how students perform in classrooms. And as we think about teachers and the impact they have on students, we're going to have to evaluate some of our thinking around teaching itself. Most of us, and I'm probably one of those folks, think about teaching as a calling. It's this thing you do because you love it. You would do it for free, right? But more recent, the last few generations of teachers, they don't necessarily see teaching as a calling. They see it as a profession. And it's a profession that they go to work at a particular time and they leave work at a particular time, and then they're looking for work-life balance in a way that when I was an experienced teacher, I didn't. I was often in the school at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, and I was rarely the only person there. Right. So we're going to have to really think about how we talk with people who don't share that calling perspective about the profession. But ultimately, relationships matter in every aspect of the process. Relationships matter between teachers, and school leaders play a particularly important part in that process. Relationships matter between teachers and students. Relationships matter between the school and the community. In every part of the process, relationships matter for all the reasons that I mentioned and all the reasons that my colleagues mentioned before that. So as we think about relationships, what we want to do is talk about the places that buttons we can push, levers that we can utilize to be successful and to be more successful in recruiting teachers and retaining the teachers that we have, retaining the effective teachers that we have. One is the understanding our learning communities, seeing our schools as learning communities that have needs, that have cultural identities, that have conversations, that have gaps and strengths. Understanding that and using the communities as places where that can support the retention issue by word of mouth, inviting people, talk with people, engaging people. But ultimately, we think that school leaders who are going to make a difference, no school leader can do this alone. And as a result, we believe, and research bears this out, that developing partnerships that matter is a key component in helping school leaders retain and find effective teachers. But once we get them, we've got to understand what lever 3 talks about: ownership and motivation. What motivates teachers who don't see the profession as a calling? What motivates teachers who want work-life balance? How do we support work-life balance, which is a good thing, but also we do think that we need people who are committed and who invested in our schools and our communities and to our students. And ultimately, the culture and framework will always matter. Culture matters in every aspect and all the ways in which my colleagues have already mentioned. But career paths is an important conversation around this retention and recruitment issue, because it invites us, maybe even compels us, to think about communities and buckets of people who we wouldn't normally look at. For example, our paraprofessionals who are already in our classrooms. How are we dealing with, how are we managing our substitutes in our classrooms? Are there effective substitutes we can pipeline into becoming certificated personnel, second chance personnel? Like career paths is going to be an important part. Examining the potential career paths is going to be an important part to understanding how we keep the people that we have, but also being able to invite and encourage people who have the skills to build relationships, who care about kids, who are committed to our communities. People who have that, we can train them about the technical lesson plan development, assessments. We can train them about the technical parts. But what about the folks in our communities who can operate as a resource for us? And then lastly, we want you to, as mentors, we think you play a key role. As I mentioned earlier, I think this is a particularly important treatment because this is a place for most administrators, we were not trained in our development. And as mentors, we think it's important if you have some conversations with school leaders about developing a climate that where both teaching and learning thrive, where teachers feel supported and invited and developed. How have mentors done that in their own experiences? What challenges have they experienced around that topic? Because that's going to be essential, because while recruiting will always be important, right behind that is keeping the most effective teachers we have in the building. That'll be important, and understanding the school culture and developing a place where they thrive and feel supported will be a key to that. But we think would be helpful if mentors think about partnerships they developed, how to support school leaders in building the skills to develop partnerships that matter. None of us can do this alone. So how can we work with organizations that give us vision and insight into communities and populations that we otherwise might not have vision on? And then ultimately, how do mentors help school leaders identify and support possible teaching candidates from various communities? We've got to be able to talk across our communities, different cultural communities, career changers, veterans, paraprofessionals. As mentors, these may be experiences, these may be challenges that you yourself have experienced. And you can talk about how things that have not worked well for you and things that have. But we're going to need to think about, we're going to have to help school leaders think about engaging communities that they're uncomfortable with, that they may have less knowledge about, less relationship with. How do we help invite them to build the skills to relate to people that they don't share common values with? And ultimately, if we build in our school leaders the ability to build partnerships, examine their school culture, and engage engage with communities that they usually don't connect with, that begins the recipe for responding to this teacher shortage in a way that meets the needs of the students and the learning communities at hand.
Thank you so much, Eric and Katie, for your input and for your information. Thank you to all of the mentors watching this. Your role is important, and we thank you for that. If you have any questions about this content, please contact your RPDC MLDS specialist in your region. And if you need additional information, you can contact Jim Masters and Kevin Freeman at the email addresses listed there. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great year. We look forward to talking with you again soon.